Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're plunging into the sharp, often scathing, but undeniably insightful world of H.L. Mencken's Prejudices. We'll be looking at selections from this remarkable collection, published between 1919 and 1927. This was really a period when Mencken was truly at the peak of his influence, a legendary figure, known for his incredibly witty and buoyant writing, and just a fantastically wide range of interests touched almost every corner of American life. Our mission today, really, is to unpack how a man so committed to reason and individual liberty became such a feared critic of American society, and what his provocations can maybe teach us about critical thinking and navigating the world around us.
Exactly. And what you're going to hear today is Mencken at his most piercing, really. In these pages, he offers a famously cynical yet deeply insightful critique. American society, culture, politics, the whole state of intellectual life back then. The core themes that really jump out are his, relentless emphasis on reason, his open disdain for what he saw as popular delusions, and his unwavering championing of intellectual honesty and artistic freedom, too. He truly believed in the power of the individual mind against, the tides of conformity.
Okay, so let's unpack those foundations first, because they really are the bedrock, aren't they? His entire perspective. Mencken was very much a distant heir to the Enlightenment, deeply valuing reason, impersonal causation, the idea that things happen for logical, observable reasons, not just whim or magic. He was also a convinced Darwinian, fascinatingly heavily influenced by Nietzsche, that idea of the Superman and a civilized minority. He actually saw himself playing a role quite similar to Voltaire, but, for 20th century America. What's striking is just how thoroughly these core influences shaped his whole worldview.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's clear that his basic views became fixed incredibly early on. And while he was capable of revising opinions on specifics, like he softened his stance later on the South or Hollywood after visiting, but his fundamental biases, those deep-seated convictions, they stayed remarkably strong. He possessed a truly formidable mind, what was described as a vigorous, virile spirit full of gusto. He really challenged anyone who might have just dismissed him as a humorist. He emphasized his profound capacity for ratiocination, deep logical reasoning.
Right. Building on that, let's explore his views on criticism in art, because it's clear he held critics to an incredibly high standard, almost uncompromising. He believed a critic must be civilized, tolerant, hospitable to all ideas, intellectually resilient. He felt they needed to be able to get into the mind of his artist, really feel the vast pressure of the creative passion. So if that's his ideal, how did he view the prevailing literary landscape of his time? Was he just perpetually disappointed, or did he find any kindred spirits?
Well, he was, in large part, deeply disappointed. He called them the grown-up sophomores, who he thought dominated criticism in America. He really lambasted them, accused them of lacking true intellectual resilience. Instead of engaging deeply, they just transformed new, challenging ideas into familiar, comfortable formulas. He noted their sheer alarm when encountering anything extraordinary or genuinely original, saw them as utterly incapable of understanding all that is most personal and original in emerging literature. He pointed to examples like Professor William Lyon Phelps, a big name then, his inability to comprehend Dreiser's realism, or Stuart Pratt Sherman trying to apply the Espionage Act, a wartime sedition law, to the arts. Just absurd. And then there was Paul Elmer More, whose strong animosity towards romanticism he found, really stifling.
Yeah, what I found particularly striking there was his vehemence against moralizing in art and criticism, calling things like Hamilton Wright Manby's white list of books, that list of morally upright literature, or Comstockery, strict moral censorship, calling it an idiotic and abominable thing. It makes you wonder how his passionate advocacy for free speech in art really resonated back then, arguing against what he called protective tariffs on ideas and these a priori assumptions that prejudge creative works.
It was radical for the time, absolutely. And it really highlights his core commitment to intellectual freedom. This conviction also informs his deep appreciation for certain artists and critics who did meet his standards. He valued men like James Huneker, Goethe, Carlyle, Gerd Brandes, because he felt they combined a truly reflective analytical faculty with a gusto of artists, that passion, that zest. He particularly praised George Jean Nathan, noted his bellicose iconoclasm, that aggressive challenge to beliefs, and his devastating wit. Nathan's unique style of burlesque, Mencken thought, was a searching and illuminating sort of criticism. So incisive, he even imagined how a platitudinous play would be better if you just played it backward.
And then there's George Ade. Mencken saw him as uniquely American, even if maybe not, top tier. Mencken admired Ade's rare knack for seeing accurately even when the thing seen is directly under his nose and recording vividly, filling his bizarre tales with actual human beings rather than forcing people into stories. That was a rare success in Mencken's eyes, and despite being primarily a comedian, Mencken saw this moralist behind him, one who could be indignant, flash a knife when needed. So what do these specific artistic assessments tell us about his broader view, his often scathing take on American society and its people?
All right, this brings us squarely to Mencken's deeply critical perspective on the American populace. The whole lot. He characterized Americans as essentially a nation of evangelists, afflicted by a messianic delusion to improve and lift up his fellow citizens, usually by force. Sound familiar? He argued that taboos on personal liberty were of extra force in democratic societies, where the majority's powers are exalted and, well, innovation often gets suppressed. He even made that funny but pointed observation that it would cost a Southern or Midwestern congressman his seat if he showed up in spats or a wristwatch. Just illustrates his belief that conformity, even in trivial stuff, was enforced by popular opinion.
Yeah, and his essay, The Sahara of the Beaux-Arts, paints a particularly bleak picture of the American South, doesn't it? He contrasts the noble spaciousness of the old Southern way, where leisure allowed for ideas, for culture, with its state then, which he describes as an intellectual Gobi or Lapland, just stark cultural wasteland. He claims Virginia, once the mother of presidents and statesmen, now lacked art, literature, philosophy, any real mind, with its education sinking to what he provocatively called Baptist seminary level. Ouch.
Big ouch. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of his critique, he asserts the South, especially Georgia, showed the worst commercial boundarism, that vulgar, boastful commercialism, superimposed on a culture, but little removed from savagery. That's strong stuff. He claimed a booming sort of piety was somehow not incompatible with the theory that lynching is a benign institution. And he even makes the truly provocative claim that Southern mulattoes were intrinsically a better animal than the pure-blooded descendants of poor whites, and were making faster progress, culturally, economically, being the only visible aesthetic activity down there. It just shows the depth of his cynical, really uncompromising analysis.
And Mencken's cynicism extends right into American politics, and the very nature of the American people he saw. He firmly believed U.S. foreign policy was consistently hypocritical, disingenuous, knavish, and dishonorable. Strong words. And he famously concluded that the American people, taken all together, constitute the most timorous, sniveling, poltroonish, ignominious mob of serfs and goose-steppers ever gathered under one flag in Christendom since the end of the Middle Ages. Wow. He points out the U.S. entered WWI appealing to public cowardice, painting Germans as about to invade, predicting an instant end to the war with American entry, showing poltroonery almost as conspicuously as it was marked by knavery. Oh, that's quite a mouthful, and certainly not flattering.
No, he pulls absolutely no punches. What's fascinating here is how his view on leadership ties into this perception of the masses. He states that kings are created by the people to satisfy the ineradicable needs of all third-rate men, to venerate, to bow down to follow and obey. He argued monarchy gets precarious not when kings grab more power, but precisely when they resign powers, suggesting people associate yielding with weakness. And this applies even to what he called the corsair of democracy, the professional mob master, who initially works for capitalism, but, he speculated, might someday throw off his employers and set up a business for himself. Cody. It paints a pretty grim picture of power dynamics in a democracy, doesn't it?
It really does. He goes even further, describing the U.S. as essentially a commonwealth of third-rate men.
Right.
Where distinction, ironically, is surprisingly easy because the general level of culture, information, taste, competence is just so low in his view. He posits the land was peopled not by the hardy adventurers of legend, but simply by incompetents who could not get on at home. And nature's lavishness here, he argued, only confirmed and augmented their native incompetence.
Wow.
He observed even immigrants, often of even lower grade, acquire what he termed the civilization of the English second table, a sort of diluted second-tier culture if they get civilized at all. It's a truly scathing assessment, almost uncharitable, really, of the national character.
Well, given that assessment, it makes you ask, why did he think the American people were so easily led? He delves into what he calls the genealogy of etiquette, trying to understand how everyday ideas, assumptions, prejudices, those unbreakable vices of mind, how they get started. He questions why we're affected by statements we know aren't true, like Lincoln's Gettysburg speech, points out the arbitrariness of social conventions, contrasting American customs like taking off hats for a flapper, but not a male dignitary with continental ones. And he notes again that such taboos are of extra force in democratic societies, where the majority's power is absolute. So is he basically saying we're all to some degree, products of unquestioned social conditioning, even when it seems illogical.
That's a powerful way to put it, yeah. And it certainly resonates with his critique of professions, particularly journalism. He suggested American journalism suffers from a lack of alert and competent professional criticism, filled with journalists who are too stupid and a coward, drenched with propaganda, often unable to get good news or write the truth. He vividly recounts how his own invented tale about bathing history, a complete fabrication, was published as fact by major newspapers and magazines, illustrating the shocking credulity of the press back then. It really makes you wonder about information reliability even today.
That anecdote is perfect. It links right to his broader criticism of the messianic delusion in public life. He saw the rise of the executive secretary, lobbyists, cause advocates, as a new governmental tyranny. Individuals representing causes for cash in hand, often preying on well-heeled fanatics who just want to make a noise in the world. He believed doing good has come to be like patriotism, a favorite device of persons with something to sell. It's a very cynical take, suggesting even good intentions can get hijacked by self-interest.
So, okay, after all this critique, what does it all mean for personal freedom? For individual thought in Mencken's world? He argued that human reason is weak and paltry unless it's wholly free reason. He believed no opinion is worth a hoot if there's any compulsion to maintain it. None. He even defended the right of individuals to choose preposterous quackery like chiropractic if they found the theory plausible, seeing attempts to prohibit it as advocating despotism and slavery. That speaks volumes about his absolute commitment to individual autonomy, doesn't it? Even when faced with choices he personally might have found irrational.
It absolutely does. Highlights his core beliefs and values perfectly. He famously preferred the honest burglar over the good politician under democracy, arguing politicians are always motivated by self-interest. Always, he concluded. The extortions and oppressions of government will go on so long as such bare fraudulence deceives and disarms the victims. Suggesting change only comes when people differentiate between necessary order and predatory rascals and swindlers. A day he humorously equates to the Tuesday following the first Monday of November preceding the resurrection morn. A truly timeless perspective, maybe, if a bit jaded.
Yeah, definitely jaded. And finally, on a more personal note, he reflects quite poignantly on the importance of home. Describes living in one Baltimore house for nearly 45 years, seeing it as much a part of me as my two hands. Contrasting this with the restless, transient lifestyle of New Yorkers who become strangers in the house he lives in, losing the charm of getting home. It's a surprisingly tender moment, isn't it? Coming from such a fierce critic. So this deep dive into H.L. Mencken's Prejudices, it really paints a picture, doesn't it? A man fiercely committed to reason, to individual liberty, but equally disdainful of what he saw as the American public's, widespread credulity, intellectual mediocrity, susceptibility to mass delusions. He pulls no punches. Critique of politicians, journalists, the very fabric of democratic society.
Indeed. His insights, while provocative, often uncomfortable. They force us to question assumptions, conventions that shape our own thinking, and to consider the forces that can lead even well-intentioned societies astray. What stands out to you from Mencken's sharp observations? Perhaps it's his relentless insistence on critical thinking, or his warning against the allure of collective delusion, still relevant, maybe even a century later.
We hope this deep dive has given you much to chew on, and perhaps a new lens through which to view that often turbulent relationship between an intellectual and his society, and perhaps even some of the forces, at play in our own world today.